Michael McDowell wins at Indy. That was the big story. Kind of the story behind the story. 7 different countries were represented in the running of the Verizon 200 at the Brickyard. And this is not your parents' NASCAR, Alexis. This is a whole different animal that we've got to get used to.
A different feel for sure. I think the fact that we were racing at Indy has something to do with it. I think, that attracts a certain, amount of race car drivers that maybe some other racetracks don't. But also, you have the success that Shane van Gisbergen had in Chicago. Other drivers see that. They want to see if they can attain that. I love it. I, for one, think it's great. I hope we have more of that in the future. I think that gets more eyes on our sport, and helps us grow. And that's it. That's the bottom line of what our goal is as a sport, is to grow. And this is only going to help that.
Alan, Van Gisbergen came home 10th. Does that support the win at Chicago? I don't want to say validate it, but does it make us think differently of him, that it wasn't just a one-off?
No, I think it only reiterates how good he is, because this is a Cup Series field, and he's 2 for 2 in terms of getting top 10s. We knew this was going to be a little harder, right? I mean, all the Cup Series field had been to Indianapolis Motor Speedway before on this road course. There was the double file restarts. There was just everything that the rest of the field was used to, that I don't want to say he had a little bit of an advantage, but it was more level playing field in Chicago. You bring the same field, the same talent level to the Indianapolis Motor Speedway, and you would expect them to outdo Shane van Gisbergen, especially on round 2. They're not going to be as nice to him, right? They're not going to underestimate him at all. And the fact that it went green for so long, it just makes you wonder, he didn't have any restart opportunities, right? He had to charge pit lane. All these other drivers, they've done it hundreds of times in their career. Shane van Gisbergen, how many green flag pit stops has he really made, right? And on a race that goes green for 2 hours, any few seconds that you lose going into the pits, coming out of the pits, any of that stuff, that's going to be a disadvantage to someone who's never done it before. So for him to still come in the top 10 a second time that he's here, it's just going to show that, he belongs. He should come back and do it again. And let's not forget what he did on the oval at Indianapolis Raceway Park a few nights before.
Yeah, that's exactly what I was going to say. All of the things that you said, I will reiterate. I think this absolutely gives more cause to us saying that he belongs in NASCAR. I think it's clear that he really wants to be in NASCAR. Justin Marks is on record saying, look, we're doing everything we can to put together something for him, possibly full-time in 2024. So that's great. But his run in the truck series, he finished 19th at IRP, which you think 19th, well, that's not a top 10. But when you think about the fact that he has never, ever driven on an oval before and was able to get a top 20, that to me is almost more impressive than what he did Sunday on the road course.
No, at one point, I guess they told him he got the lucky dog, and he's like, is that a good thing? Or
yeah,
not?
I don't even know what that is.
Very funny. So it was a learning environment.
For sure.
All right, the countries that were represented at Indy: Japan, Germany, New Zealand, Australia, Mexico, the United Kingdom, and the United States. Alan and Alexis, I think the other side of this is all of those countries had people paying attention to a NASCAR race, maybe for the first time ever, because they've got a rooting interest.
Absolutely. Part of that is Indy, the fact that they're at Indy, and that's what attracts drivers and the top talent. Everyone knows Indianapolis Motor Speedway. That's why it's so important to be there. Part of that's probably the next-gen car, is that you can put drivers of different disciplines that at least it's somewhat more similar than say, the Gen 6 car or any other iteration of a stock car before, and just NASCAR on a global plane. I mean, it's just good things that people want to come here, and vice versa. Like Jimmy Johnson going over and doing the 24 Hours of Le Mans and the Garage 56 program. It's working both ways. I think that's the best part of it all, is that NASCAR is going to Europe and Europe's coming over here. It's that whole thing. It's great.
One of the things, obviously a little bit, I digress from the international conversation, but we haven't even yet talked about the fact that this was another weekend of the IndyCar NASCAR doubleheader, and how that helps both motorsports, biggest motorsports in North America. So, as a whole, this Indy weekend, I think has only helped growth of NASCAR, and that's what we're looking for.
Having been at Indy this week working with the IMS radio group and in the media center, there were reporters there strictly to be there to cover some of these drivers.
Right.
There was a Japanese media contingent. There was stations in Japan carrying the race, and they never do that because there was an interest because Kamui Kobayashi was competing in this race. That's what you need for growth. And when people talk about international racing, I don't know that you have to go race in France, but you have to have a reason for French, Japanese, Germans to watch this.
That's a great point. And that surprised me in hearing Kobayashi's, I think, some of the pre-race interviews, is that they don't have NASCAR over there. It's not shown a lot on television. So for someone, especially of his age, remember NASCAR went there back in the 90s. So that must have been a big deal. But to hear that the interest, I would hope, is growing again, once again, in Japan or anywhere that doesn't have currently NASCAR all the time. That's what's cool. And the fact that, you know, it's the dots are being connected everywhere. I like that. I would love to see some sort of street race or exhibition internationally. I think that'd be very cool across the pond. But let's start with Mexico or Canada first.
You know, and what I think is cool, too, is that, you know, you have these drivers that want to be a part of NASCAR. Like when a lot of people talk about motorsports and the pinnacle of motorsports, maybe NASCAR isn't exactly what they talk about or they think of as the top motorsport in the world. But when you have drivers from all these other disciplines that are like, hey, I want to do that, that sends a pretty powerful message.
And the other thing is 3 of these drivers were in very competitive cars.
Yes.
Kamui Kobayashi was in a 2311 car. Brodie Kostecki was in an RCR car. He had a really good car. If he had not crashed at the tail end of qualifying and had to go to a backup, I think he might have made a little bit more noise. And obviously, Shane van Gisbergen is in a very good car for Trackhouse Racing. The others, not so much, but you still, I love the flavor of this. And I like the fact that a couple of them performed well enough that it's not just a gimmick.
Yeah.
No, not at all.
It's not just, look at that, isn't that cute? And now go finish 24th. You know.
And I think they have to learn. Now, I think we've seen just an evolution since, remember, we were all in COTA together, and we saw it was Jenson Button and it was Kimi Räikkönen. And look, honestly, at the end of these races, they kind of got eaten up in terms of they are not used to the aggression. Well, look at Jenson Button going out there now, just a few months later at Indy, mixing it up with Ricky Stenhouse.
He's knocking the snot out of people. Yeah. By the way, we love the way he sounds. Here's some Shane van Gisbergen.
Well, it's aggressive, but it's fair. You know, I put a block on the 48, and then the next corner he just moved me, so I guess I deserve that. But yeah, the racing was fine. I really enjoyed it, and all the battling when you go for a move on someone, they give you room and they expect it back. So yeah, really cool.
All right, I will hold my Mad Max jokes because he's actually a New Zealander, not an Australian. So doesn't apply.
I like what he said though.
But I do. I like what he said, and I think he's going to be a new fan favorite. They're going to find a home for him at Trackhouse
for sure.
1, he's a good driver. 2, I think he's a sponsor magnet.
I think so.
I think people are going to want to hang money on him.
Well, he already has. I mean, I don't know if you noticed, but all weekend he was wearing a Red Bull hat. Does that mean he pulls some Red Bull money back to NASCAR?
In Australia, in Australia, he's Mr. Red Bull.
Yeah.
So, I mean, top stuff.
Well, Max can't spend all that money over there.
Well, yeah, no kidding.
Well, yeah, he can. He's an F1.